So, as we continue with our lessons, I just want to remind you, and as you already know, starting a freelance interpreting business can be very rewarding and exciting. And, this is something that if you have a language skill or any type of skill, we want to make sure that you start off on the right track. So, I want to go over some additional steps and before we get started, let's kind of review a little bit of what we went through in the previous module. So I wanted you to take some notes. So I want you to sit down and think about, okay, what industry or sector you want to work in. Because many of you still don't know um, what sector or business. Some of you say, well, I just want to become certified. Okay, well, you want to become certified, but do you want to become a medical certified interpreter? A legal interpreter, administrative interpreter? What skills do you actually have and can you utilize in the industry that you want to tap into? And because many of you are spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars already in training, and just like when you go to college, right? The purpose of going to college, I personally think, is that you want to explore different excuse me, different niches and you want to see what your capabilities are. And the same thing with interpreting. You want to, before you start spending all this money, you want to see, okay, well, do I really like the medical industry? Do I want to start and tap into the legal industry? So it's important to really explore, self-analyze yourself before you start paying additional for certifications, training and development, and so on and so forth. The other thing is really understanding your role and functions because many of you continue to make these mistakes. Once again, we are just the voice. We are not an administrator. We're not there to make friends. We're not there to handle tasks that are not within our scope of work. Same thing when you have a job, right? You get your scope of work and that's what you follow and that's what you do. You want to identify your language pairs, which ones are your strengths. What are you proficient in? What areas and industries you want to focus once again? Because many of you say, oh, well, I want to do medical, legal, blah, blah, blah. But then when you start doing it, you really don't like it, or you're not really understanding it, or you really don't are not sure if that's the industry you want to do. So I always recommend that when you're first starting out, I recommend that you guys start off, for example, if you're going to enter the medical industry, start off with basic general appointments such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, follow ups, dental appointments. Those are very easy to maneuver, to handle. The terminology is not complex. And I think many of us, when we first, when we were younger and we used to interpret for our friends and family, those are the type of appointments that we used to handle. So understanding the terminology both in the source and the target language are going to be very important. The other thing is the legal industry. Some of you say, oh, well, I want to do immigration or I want to do, some of you are not familiar with depositions or civil litigation and other aspects. So every sector has like different branches. So the same thing with legal. Okay, you can start off with just basic legal assignments, such as like basic immigration, client attorney meetings, or even depot preps, because those do not require certifications. But I highly, highly, and I cannot stress it enough, you got to do your due diligence and you got to self train when it comes to terminology, both in the source and the target language. Understanding the terminology is going to be a must. There's also a lot of other basic appointments, such as business. You can do employee employer meetings, health benefits, dental, um, intakes or new employee hires. There's so many sectors out there that need interpreters. So assessing your skills and your qualifications and really self evaluating yourself, it's going to be very important. So I also want you to compile a list if you've been doing interpreting or have even done it, in a non-professional matter, um, but that you feel comfortable and confident that you've done a good work. I want you to compile a list because we want to showcase that interpreting experience for those particular projects, and we eventually want to get, positive feedback, testimonials In order for you to be able to handle these tasks at hand, the goal of this training is to help those new and ongoing interpreters to understand the industry and help you better prepare yourself for any situation. Because with over 60 million people in the United States speaking a second language other than English as their primary language, the odds are that you're going to encounter more and more LEP, meaning limited English proficient people. So, being fluent in multiple languages is not only a wonderful skill, but it also offers a unique understanding of a different culture, which has become an increasingly valuable asset in today's multicultural society. But it's too often assumed that being bilingual automatically provides the skills to become an interpreter. But the reality is that professional interpreters have a distinctive skills that bilingual employees often don't. So keep in mind that it takes more than just knowing two languages in order to become a successful interpreter, but you also must know and be familiar with the functions and responsibilities of being a professional interpreter. So, what industries are you wanting to tap into? So, for example, do you want to become an interpreter, a translator, a transcriptionist, over the phone or video interpreter? Yes, being bilingual, you can actually tap into these different industries. What sector do you want to work in? Do you want to become a medical, legal, business? Interpreter. So understanding and seeing, where you're going to adapt the best, utilizing your language skills. What skill sets do you have? Is it verbal? Is it written? As well, do you have any business experience? Because to be able to launch a successful career and business, you have to have not only the experience, the knowledge, but the expertise in order for you to be able to start and grow your business. So, what I want you to do is, I want you to write things down on your worksheet. Make sure that you understand the industry needs as well as the market, because again, a lot of you go in and say, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that without really exploring and understanding the industry and seeing if there's a need. Because let's say you want to become, I don't know, a stylist, right? But if there's no need in your area, then now you're just spending all this time, money, and effort trying to become a stylist if there's no actual need for that business in your area. Now, if depending on where you live, those are all factors that you need to consider, because especially after COVID, a lot of things have changed, right? So a lot of companies are now doing Zoom appointments or over the phone. A lot of them sometimes now that they started opening up, they want you to go on site. Are you able to go on site for these interpreting assignments? So I really want you to, dive in, self-analyze yourself, start writing things down, because these are things and exercises that you're going to have to do, as well as doing some research, because what may apply for me here in my area may not necessarily apply for you in your area, because not everything is, the same. So I want you guys to really be open-minded and really consider these things when you decide to venture off onto this wonderful career. Now, I always tell everyone, you gotta enjoy and love what you do. I don't care what it is, but you gotta find something that you actually love and enjoy. So evolve in it, train, develop your skills. And so here I want to share with you guys some effective communication skills that are going to be fundamental for you as an interpreter, in order for you to convey the message accurately and facilitate understanding between individuals. So here's some of examples. Number one is active listening. Practice active listening by fully focusing on the speaker, maintaining eye contact, and avoiding distractions. Learn to read nonverbal cues such as facial expressions, body language, to gain comprehensive understanding of the speaker's message. Summarize and paraphrase the speaker's words to ensure accurate comprehension. Note-taking techniques is very important. Learn and practice effective note-taking techniques, including shorthand symbols, abbreviations, and try to develop a system that's going to work best for you to capture key points and important details during the interpreting process. Review and refine your note-taking skills regularly to improve efficiency and accuracy, as well as cultural sensitivity. Cultivate the cultural sensitivity by familiarizing yourself with the customs, traditions, and social norms of the cultures involved in the interpreting process. Avoid assumptions or stereotyping and approach every situation with an open mind and respect for cultural differences. Seek opportunities to learn about different cultures, through, whether it be through books, reading, documentaries, events, um, and try to provide clear and concise delivery. Work on delivering your interpretations in clear, concise, and confident manners. Practice your structuring your sentences and using appropriate vocabulary to convey the message. Develop the ability to adapt to style different settings and audiences, maintaining professionalism at all times. Managing stress and pressure is a must. Interpreting can be a very demanding and high pressure situation, industry. So learning techniques to manage stress effectively is going to be very important. Practice deep breathing exercises, mindfulness, or mediation to stay calm during challenging interpreting assignments. Try to develop strategies to handle time constraints as well as complex topics or challenging speakers, ensuring accurate interpretation um, that's under pressure. Remember that effective communication skills are a continuous process of learning and improvement. Also, regular practice, seeking feedback, and actively working on these skills will contribute to your growth as an interpreter because every situation is different. And one thing that I learned throughout my years in business is that, you can walk in thinking, oh, this is going to be an easy assignment for a medical assignment. But without really knowing how complex or stressful the situation may be and not being prepared, it can become very stressful. Especially, I've shared for those of you that have followed me on my YouTube channel, I've shared a lot of different scenarios. For example, when I've done interpreting at the parole prisons, it's very stressful, very intense, and depending on the subject matter, depending on the criminal background, I mean, there's been times where I've had to like literally just cancel the rest of my assignments just to be able to calm myself down because of the situation, and that's okay. The same thing when you're doing simultaneous conferences, you think that it's going to be an easy conference, and little do you know if they don't have the prep materials, if you don't have the terminology down, or somebody calls in sick and you're handling the assignment on your own. Different scenarios, different situations can create a lot of chaos, a lot of problems, a lot of issues. I've had situations as well where I've, went into a conference thinking I'm going to be working with a team interpreter when I'm working with agencies, and it turns out that the interpreters either don't have the experience, they don't have the knowledge or expertise working with interpreting equipment. So now I have to, take the time to train them and help them in order for us to successfully get the assignment completed. And all of those things can be very challenging, and you will run into these situations as you continue with your career. So it is super important that I always, since the beginning of my business, every single situation, I made notes of it, so that way, if and the situation arised again, I knew how to handle it. I knew what steps to take, what to do. So I highly recommend that you always have a notepad, that you always handle situations at the utmost professional manner, and that you take notes. Notes are very, very important. Take notes of terminology because who knows, you might have this appointment today having to do with government and you're thinking, oh, I'm never going to do it again. And, 3 months, 6 months down the road, the assignment comes up again. But if you're not developing the skill set and your communication skills and evolving, then things are just going to be that much more difficult. The other thing that I highly recommend too is a lot of my training that I've done a lot of self-training when it comes to terminology is, I love watching Law and Order. I love the criminal sector. So watching Law and Order and just, interpreting while I'm watching it and vice versa, or even the news, the same thing. Reading books or I love criminology, so I have quite a few books. Again, if you follow me on my YouTube or on my social media channels, I share a lot of these resources with you in helping you develop those skills because nobody's going to train you with the terminology unless hands-on experience and you're doing it yourself. So everyone can try to teach you business skills and so on and so forth, but hands-on experience is a must. And so learning from your mistakes is going to be super important. So keeping those things, those little tips in mind is going to be very, very important for the growth of your business. As an interpreter, also, my role is to facilitate the smooth flow of communication between parties who speak different languages. And I also understand that being transparent is essential in increasing the environment where everyone feels heard and understood. To ensure effective communication, always pay attention to the seating and positioning. I always try to position myself in a way that allows me to have a clear view of both the speaker as well as the audience. This allows me to observe facial expressions, body language, and non verbal cues that contribute to overall message. By being strategic in positioning myself and accurately interpreting these nonverbal signals, it enhances the quality of communication. So before every interpreting session, I make it a priority to conduct a pre-session. This pre-session will allow me to help establish a rapport with the speaker, familiarize myself with the subject matter, and during this time, I try to clarify any terminology, concepts that may arise, ensuring that I have comprehensive and understanding the topic at hand. Additionally, I use this opportunity to discuss specific expectations or preferences with the speakers, such as the pace, clarification requests throughout the interpreting process. Try to be mindful in maintaining transparency in my communication. I strive to convey the message faithfully and accurately without adding or omitting any information because I understand that my role of being a neutral conduit is crucial to remain unbiased and impartial. And by maintaining transparency, I try to do that. I also try to build the trust with the speakers, promoting open and effective communication between them and my interactions with both the speakers as well as the audience. I am committed in fostering a respectful and inclusive environment. I actively listen to each speaker, giving them my undivided attention. I ensure that everyone's voice is heard and respected regardless of language barriers. And by creating this atmosphere of inclusivity, I enable a more collaborative and productive exchange of ideas. And as an interpreter, I am dedicated to facilitating effective communication by employing transparent communication practices. I pay attention to the seating and positioning that are very important. Once again, for every interpreting assignment, it's going to be different. So as you see here on this image, I was actually at the state capitol providing interpretation for the governor, and it was a very informal seating or meeting, I should say. And so I did have some audience, as you can see, they're kind of giving me a thumbs up. They were sitting in the back, but the actual people that I was interpreting for, I'm right behind them because I was providing quote unquote whispering interpreting because we were not utilizing interpreting equipment. And the same thing, every situation is going to be different. Sometimes the clients will ask you to, provide interpreting services in certain areas that may or may not that you may or may not agree with, but also understanding your position and kind of just letting the client know why you feel that this area of seating is going to be better, or that area of seating is going to be better for them. Because again, most of the clients have never worked with an interpreter, and so you being able to facilitate that for them is going to be very important. Taking notes, as you can see, I have my notepad there because if we were doing consecutive interpretation, although some of them wanted simultaneous. So when I'm doing simultaneous, I'm not taking notes, but when I do consecutive, yes, I am taking notes. And so that's why I have my notepad right there on hand. So it's super important that you analyze every situation. So arriving, 15, 20, 30 minutes before the assignment, it's super important because that will help you do the pre-session, get an understanding of the appointment, trying to, if you don't have any materials beforehand, being able to look up some of the terminology. And, there's different tips and different situations, but this is one of the things that I highly, highly recommend is doing the pre-session for every single appointment. So now we've touched on a lot of things, and so this is a quick reminder. Some of you may say, "Oh, why do I need a reminder of this?" But believe it or not, sometimes we are just not prepared. So always be prepared with notepads. Make sure that you keep your phone in silent mode. Do not answer your phone during an interpreting session. That is very unprofessional. Now, I know that sometimes emergencies do happen, and that's okay. And the only way to do that is by excusing yourself if you know that it's an emergency. Otherwise, I highly recommend that you keep your phones in silent mode or turning it off. Also recommend that, to have a dictionary, although I know that some providers don't like you to use a dictionary, but again, we are not a dictionary, so we don't know every single terminology, and having something on hand is sometimes very important. You can also use different apps like, yeah, some people are against or don't agree with Google Translate, or DeepL. Those ProZ also has different tools for terminology that you can have on hand. Make sure that you always have your calendar, whether it be paper format or on your phone, to schedule and track your appointments. The last thing you want is to be double booking yourself for appointments. Now, it's very important to understand, again, our role as an interpreter. We talked about earlier about being a good conduit, which means you want to carry out the information, um, exactly what is being said, as it is being said, and nothing, by omitting or changing anything, interpreting in the first person versus he said or she saying. You always want to interpret as the first person. You also want to reinforce the primary relationship, interpreting pauses like you know, those kind of sounds. Everything or anything that adds meaning to the communication, interpreter gives accurate interpretation, not a literal interpretation. The interpreter also reflects in tone, inflection, and volume, include all the information that carries meaning in the message, being a good clarifier, making sure that everyone understands. And the role of the interpreter is to adjust the register, makes word pictures of terms that have no linguistic equivalent, and checks for understanding. Lowering the register refers to the level of formal or complex language persons choose to use. High register speech is very formal and complex. Use higher register if you think the LEP will understand. Lower the register, but not change the meaning, because the meaning must stay the same. And ask the provider to speak in simpler language, create word pictures. Sometimes there's no words with the same meaning. The symbolic meaning, symbols have meaning in only one language. Check for comprehension. Be aware of clues such as suggest that either the LEP or provider is not understanding. So you can say, the interpreter would like to ask if the LEP understood. If the LEP is really confused, the interpreter should communicate this to the provider so that the provider can explain. It's not the job of the interpreter to do the explaining. Again, doing the pre-session, it will help you set the ground rules for the interpreted session. And this pre-session should be given to the everyone in the room or within the assignment. So, for example, you can say, "Hello, my name is John Doe," or "My name is Fabiola. I will be your Spanish interpreter. There are a few things to help me do a better job with my interpretation. First, please speak directly to the LEP. I will interpret everything you say exactly as you say it. If there's something you do not want the LEP or provider to hear, please do not say it. Use short sentences and pause often so I can interpret accurately and completely. If I need you to clarify, I will ask you to do so. So this kind of sets the ground rules for everyone there. That way there's no side conversations, or maybe if they make a comment and they didn't want the LEP or vice versa to hear, at least this way you're setting the ground rules to letting them know, hey, everything that's going to be said within this room or this venue or this assignment will be interpreted. Cultural broker, bridging, linking, or meditating between groups, mediating, I'm sorry, between groups or persons or different cultural backgrounds in order to reduce conflict or change. In this role, the interpreter provides um, a necessary cultural framework for understanding the message being interpreted. The interpreter takes this role when cultural differences are leading to a misunderstanding on the part of either party or the LEP. The interpreter should also speak the specific dialect of the patient and be well versed with local knowledge, cultural beliefs, and practices of the patient's cultural group. Culture is a shared of set beliefs and systems, values, practices, and assumptions which determine how we interact and interpret in the world. Cultural competence means that we must educate ourselves further about other cultures, the role cultural plays in a variety of settings, and the differences these can generate um, in these different types of settings. So we need to learn to the specific information about the community and simultaneously treat each person as a unique individual. Otherwise, we run the risk of stereotyping if we do not maintain the delicate balance. You want to be a cultural broker. How to be a cultural broker, I should say. One of the fundamentals of doing interpretation correctly is that not only are you the interpreter, but the cultural broker. For example, in Asian cultures, they may have home remedies, procedures that might sound strange to a Western person, but the interpreter has to, in his or her way, explain the meaning of the estero concept. The first step to intervening is to be aware that the culture based misunderstanding may be occurring. And the interpreter should intervene in a transparent way, letting the patient know what she is going to do, then offer key information to the provider. The goal is to keep, you know, back to the interpreting as fast as possible using the following steps. So be alert, potential cultural barriers. Tell the patient briefly what you intend to tell the provider. Briefly tell the provider the appropriate information and don't give the impression that is necessary true for this particular. The LEP above, all avoid stereotyping. So let the provider decide what to do with the information. Go back to interpreting. Make sure you are respectful, make no assumptions. Advocate also means representing someone acting on their behalf. However, in the interpreting industry, advocacy is the most controversial for interpreters. However, as an interpreter, we do not advocate. Remember, we are just a voice. At least that is the understanding, although things may change and depending on the setting and situation, it's up to you as a professional interpreter to decide and keeping your professionalism. And so the other thing that I want to share is that, every situation is going to be different. And one of the things to know and to learn is that, for example, a lot of the times when you get an assignment and they say, "Oh, I need a Spanish interpreter," but then when you show up to the assignment, it can be something more like a dialect, depending on the region, or maybe these people are either from Peru or Central America, and so the terminology, the terms and meanings and culture is completely different. So really understanding and asking the right questions before you take on an assignment is going to be very important. I've had a couple of situations where I've been called on an emergency basis and they tell me, "Oh, I need a Spanish interpreter," and I show up and then turns out that it was actually like different dialects that I do not speak. And therefore I had to be creative because it was in an emergency situation. So believe it or not, one of the creativities was actually a paper and pen, and drawing both, the LEP and myself, and being able to communicate uh, the conversation to the provider in order for this patient to be seen and to be treated, because there was no time to get somebody on the phone that spoke the dialect, and there was no time to wait for the interpreter that actually spoke the dialect. So just being creative. Now it's going to work sometimes, it may not work at other times, but again, being very, very um, on top of your game and basically asking the right questions when you're accepting an assignment is going to be crucial. So I cannot stress that enough. So see this little image here with regards to, your industry. You want to, put your values and be able to market and develop your skills, do what you love, be diverse, and ultimately grow your business. Here are some things to take into consideration when you decide to work as an interpreter versus a translator. Remember that interpreting involves working in real time. Basically, you're providing interpreting services on the spot, versus translating, on the other hand, involves written translations that you can basically work from home, providing those services. Now, with COVID, things have changed a lot, and so now we are doing a lot more video remote interpretation as well as over the phone. The other thing is that with interpreting, it requires, strong oral communication, focusing and developing excellent communication skills. Clear enunciations, effective delivery, and active listening are key. The versus the translators, on the other hand, should emphasize more on the written skills, attention to detail, and the ability to convey the meaning accurately, both in interpreting and translation. Quick thinking and adaptability. Interpreting requires thinking on your feet, basically. It's fast paced, processing information rapidly, and delivering immediate trans or interpretation, I should say. Being adaptable and comfortable with improvising, which is going to be crucial depending on any type of setting, I should say. Now, translators again have the luxury of having more time, research, having access to reference materials, revisions, and allowing them more time, to provide accurate and timely translation. Um, Interpreters also need to grasp the broader context of the conversation while they're interpreting, including cultural nuances and nonverbal cues. And so it's important to understand that when you decide or when you're looking into, whether you want to become an interpreter or translator, it's not just saying, "Oh, I can write good, I want to become a translator," or "I can speak good, I want to become an interpreter." No, there's a lot more things that you need to take into account before you decide that you want to enter one industry versus the other. Now, again, with everything that has changed since 2019, interpreters are now able to work a lot more from, again, via video remote or over the phone. But a lot of businesses, as I mentioned before, they are requiring a lot more on-site interpreters, which is kind of good, I think, being able to have physical presence when you're doing interpretations. And so, having access to a lot of these tools and resources and platforms is super important, especially when you are trying to grow your business. The other thing you want to consider is building rapport. Interpreters interact directly with the speakers and the audiences. You want to establish a good customer service, interpersonal personnel dynamics. And the other thing with the translators, a lot of it is done just via computer. You're going back and forth with documents and client estimates and quotes and providing the translations via email versus the interactions on site with interpretations are the role requires a lot more um, to to do. And so it's super important that for those of you that have asked me, well, I want to do both. That's great. Like, but for example, myself, I do translations, but just because I do translations doesn't mean that I take on any translation assignment that comes along. No, I have to feel comfortable, knowledgeable, and that I can, fulfill the assignment that is being assigned to me, because customer service and customer satisfaction is super important for me in order for me to get repeat customers, in order for me to get referrals. And so establishing myself as a good, professional, competent, experienced interpreter or translator is super important. So when you start off, you want to decide, okay, I have these strong abilities and skill sets with interpreting or translation or vice versa or both. You want to be able to establish yourself as a professional business and acquire all the school skills and tools and skills, not schools, tools that are required in order for you to successfully complete the job at hand. So in the previous lesson, we talked about, if you remember this image, we talked about, becoming a simultaneous, consecutive, or whispered interpreter. So it's very important that you develop those skills, whether you want to become a consecutive, simultaneous, or conference interpreter. And so by doing so is I highly recommend that you practice on note taking techniques, being able to capture key points during the speaker's presentation, focusing on abbreviations, symbols, the structures, in order for you to reference the key points. Memory retention exercises enhance your memory retention by practicing listening speeches, presentations, and summarizing them afterwards. This will strengthen your ability to retain information for the diverse interpretation methods. And the other one is delivering techniques. Work on delivering skills such as clear enunciations, the pacing, and maintaining a natural flow while interpreting. Practice delivering interpretations with fluency and accuracy. Simultaneous interpreting is building multitasking abilities. Yes, develop the ability to process information in one language while speaking in another. And practicing these exercises, for example, listen to a speech in one language while simultaneously summarizing it into another. Speed and accuracy, work on increasing your pace, your speed, and just practice, doing some practice sessions. Start with shorter speeches and gradually work your way up to longer and more complex contexts. Also, it's super important to familiarize yourself with the equipment. Get comfortable with the interpreting equipment, such as microphones, headsets, booths. Practice using the equipment while also maintaining focus on the speech, providing accurate interpretations. Conference interpreting expand your vocabulary, and not just in conference but in any type of setting. Develop your specialized terminology in the various fields such as business, law, medicine, technology, hospitality, depending on the business sector that you want to enter. Also build a solid foundation of the industry with specific vocabulary terms, because like I said before, just because you do one assignment today doesn't mean that 3 to 6 months from now that assignment may not come up or something similar. So you want to be able to enhance your skills and build on that terminology. Also, do the research and preparation despite the assignment. You always want to do your research, prepare before any assignment. Familiarize yourself with the agenda, with the speakers, the subject matter. Ensure that are confident and that you provide accurate and complete interpretations. You also want to engage in simulated conference interpreting exercises. You want to mimic real life scenarios, practice simultaneous interpreting while managing speaker transitions, capturing key points, and maintaining the flow of communication. So different scenarios that I've experienced before. Like I said, when I first started with conference interpreting, yeah, just like anything else, you're scared, you're not sure, you're nervous, you don't know how to prepare, how to handle situations. So researching and preparation ahead of each appointment is super important, because again, we are not dictionaries and we're not going to know every single term. But as you can see in this picture, I was actually at a I believe this one was a city council meeting. We were on a booth and we were doing real live interpretation, both in person, but we were also interpreting via Zoom to the LEPs that were in the Zoom. And so we were also having to go up into the front to basically provide interpretation for those in person and vice versa. So being able to have that material on prior, it allowed us the opportunity to research terminology, to be prepared, and develop a basic terminology, key points, keywords that would arise for this assignment. And the same thing, regardless whether it be a dental appointment, a medical appointment, a legal appointment, you always want to be prepared. And the difference of being a good professional and interpreter and just being bilingual is that you can being bilingual is just picking up whatever term. Being a professional interpreter is basically conveying the message accurately and completely from start to finish. And so being able to have and build on those skill set is going to be super important in order to help you grow and to stand out from the crowd. Now, in every industry, there's ethics of professional code of conduct, and we reviewed those in the previous lessons, but I want to touch base and amplify this by providing you guys a little bit more information. So the Interpreter's Code of Ethics, plays a crucial role in guiding the professional conduct and responsibilities of the interpreters. And here are some of the reasons why the Code of Ethics is so important. One, it um, provides and builds client trust and confidentiality. It establishes the foundation of trust between interpreters and the clients. Adhering to strict confidentiality standards ensures that sensitive information shared during interpreting sessions remains private and protected. Clients must feel confident that their personal and professional matters will be handled with utmost discretion. Impartiality and neutrality. Interpreters are expected to remain impartial and neutral, faithfully transmitting the speaker's message without adding personal opinions or biases. This fosters an environment of fairness and equal representation, promoting effective communication between parties with different perspectives. It also provides the accountability. The Code of Ethics sets clear expectations for interpreters to maintain a high level of professionalism and accountability in their work. This includes being punctual, prepared, and respectful during interpreting assignments. Interpreters are responsible for upholding the reputation of the profession and ensuring that the quality and accuracy of their interpretations are there. Cultural sensitivity and respect plays a huge part. Interpreters encounters diverse individuals and cultural backgrounds in their work. Therefore, the Code of Ethics emphasizes the importance of cultural sensitivity and respect for all parties involved. This means understanding and appreciating cultural differences, adapting interpretations accordingly, and avoiding any actions that may perpetuate stereotypes or discrimination. Conflicts of interest as well. The Code of Ethics also provides guidelines for interpreters to navigate potential conflicts of interest that may arise during their work. Interpreters must disclose any relationships or affiliations that could impact their objectivity or compromise the integrity of the interpreting process. This ensures transparency and maintains the integrity of the profession. Continual professional development, the Code of Ethics also encourages interpreters to engage in ongoing professional development to enhance their skills and stay updated with best practices in the field. Interpreters are encouraged to pursue additional training, attend conferences, and seek opportunities to self improvement to provide the highest quality interpreting services. And overall, the Interpreter's Code of Ethics serves as a compass for interpreters, guiding their ethical decision making, promoting professionalism, protecting client trust, and upholding the integrity of the interpreting profession. Adhering to the Code of Ethics ensures that interpreters maintain the highest standards of conduct, professionalism, and service delivery. And I cannot agree with with all of this more than anything because again, establishing yourself as a professional, providing the services accurately, professionally, and really setting standards, processes, and procedures for your business is going to provide the client with value. It's going to provide them with, with those making you the interpreter or translator of choice, knowing that when they hire or contract your services, that they're going to be getting an interpreter that actually knows what he or she's doing, that is going to provide them with those ethics and standards and protocols that they are seeking. Because trust me, this industry, as great as it is, there is a lot of ups and downs. There is a lot of good, bad, and evil. There is a lot of interpreters that unfortunately do not uphold to these standards and that do not, even know anything about the code of ethics or standards or processes or procedures or terms and conditions and the whole nine yards. Therefore, it is important that you set these standards for yourself, that you develop these skills, that you are constantly looking into ways to train yourself in order for you to once again boss up and rise and stand up from the rest.